New chair, who dis? It's been a while. You guys miss me? Is Shigaraki actually about to take some of Deku's quirks? What's up? It's Truth Hero, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia chapter review. That feels good to say. So, Boku no Hero Academia chapter 286 of the manga. I'll go over everything from the fight between Deku and Shigaraki actually touching Deku for the first time, as well as what Gigantomachia is doing right now, and Shigaraki and Deku in this one-for-all vestige world. And of course, because I didn't do it last week and I kind of owe you guys, I'm going to talk about a few possibilities between Shigaraki and Bakugou. So let's dive into this one. The chapter opens with Deku in just absolute shock looking at Bakugou, and Bakugou murmuring, "To win alone, without friends, the power of friendship in anime." If you thought Deku was mad at Shigaraki before, oh boy, just how mad is he going to be now? He's going to go absolutely insane on Shigaraki. On a lighter note, if Deku, Bakugou, and the rest of the heroes do get out of this fight alive and, I don't know, in one piece, Bakugou is probably going to hold this over his head for a while. Like, hey, remember when Shigaraki tried to take one for all from you with his tentacles? Yeah, who saved you that day? Who was the guy that did that? Oh, I don't know, huh? It was me. I find it funny how last week, y'all thought Bakugou wasn't doing anything in this fight. I mean, not all of you, but I saw a lot of comments that were saying, oh, Horikoshi just builds up Bakugou's character, and then when the time comes in these huge battles, doesn't do much with him. Like, Bakugou only got one clean explosion and hit on Shigaraki, and that's it. Well, what about now? I mean, Bakugou is basically the reason that Deku's even alive at this point. Todoroki swoops in to catch Bakugou, and big props to him. Also, I think he's still holding Endeavor while doing this, so thank you, Shoto. Shigaraki comments on how much blood has been spilled in vain during this battle, and that everything the heroes have done, all the damage even to him, was the biggest waste of time as he gears up for another attack. Can I just say, how scary and awesome does Shigaraki look, all charred and damaged and beaten up? But you get the sense that even though he's in this dire situation, even though he's become a monster and he may never return to normal, he may never be able to fully heal. I don't know how his quirk works, but there may be irreversible damage, but I think he's right in what he's saying. Shigaraki definitely has the ability to end all the heroes. He could do another decay wave and he could let loose with another quirk and just powers we don't know about. We've seen this before, especially now that Deku is sort of losing focus. It's now become a battle of whose angry resolve is greater. And by the way, Deku looks equally as menacing as Shigaraki does right now. This yet again suggests even more parallels between Deku and Shigaraki. When someone wields power with anger and lacks control, that power will generally respond in a horrible, vicious way. Both of them are, if not completely, then mostly driven by raw emotion, that being anger, at this point. Whoever controls their mind better in this moment is likely to win this fight and this battle. And like we see, Deku and Shigaraki are now both in this one-for-all, all-for-one vestige world flashback, dream type thing. Of course, maybe only in Deku's mind, but I actually have reason to believe that they're both experiencing this, and I'll talk about this in a bit. And they're now communicating with their previous masters, Shigaraki, of course, with All for One, and Deku now with Nana. Of course, Shigaraki's been in contact with All for One from the very beginning of this fight, but it's likely that they'll get their momentum and maybe some advice on how to win this fight from this dream world or flashback or whatever this is. Speaking of this resolve, Deku gears up for another attack against Shigaraki and bites one of his all-for-one tendrils, shattering it and yelling at Shigaraki to cancel it. Obviously, this is referencing Shigaraki's all-for-one tentacles that pierced Bakugou, and Deku telling Shigaraki not to take his quirk. I'm going to discuss this a little later on in the review in more depth, but I don't even think Shigaraki wants Bakugou's quirk. I think Shigaraki, at this point, he didn't expect Bakugou to jump in front of him. He was going for Deku, but maybe he'll sort of mess with Deku's emotions with him. For now, it's kind of safe to say that Shigaraki can combine quirks with these all-for-one tentacles. We've seen All for One use forced Quirk Activation with these and just to attack All Might and throw him. So It's possible that Shigaraki could combine the quirk of All for One and use tentacles to take quirks from a distance, or use the tentacles for something like air cannon. We get a bit of repose here as the chapter flashes to Gigantomachia wreaking havoc on these cities and them trying to evacuate. And who would have thought that a snapshot of Gigantomachia's chaos and all the damage he's doing is actually the calmest moment of this chapter. In this moment of rest that we get, there is one very crucial thing here. Gigantomachia says he can smell his master's scent. But two of them. What? How is it possible that Gigantomachia smells two masters? It's not like he can sniff All for One all the way from prison in Tartarus. I mean, that place is sealed. So how is it possible that Gigantomachia can not only smell Shigaraki, but also All for One? Perhaps the Titan known as Gigantomachia has another way of sensing his masters, and the mere presence of All for One communicating with Shigaraki in his brainwaves is enough to elicit this reaction from Machia. Either that or All for One just stank. Or maybe with this cool image of Shigaraki's face being split and then seeing All for One's face inside his, maybe Shigaraki, in receiving all these quirks and through this procedure with Dr. Ujiko, actually has some of All for One's body and DNA in him, and maybe Gigantomachia is actually picking up on that. We do know he has heightened senses, so maybe Shigaraki is like a hybrid of All for One and whoever Tomura was. Also, we have these people that are reacting to the Gigantomachia situation and the evacuation, but what about Yaoyorozu's anesthesia plan? When is that gonna kick in? I made a separate video about this, about how she maybe failed in this, or perhaps she's even the traitor and didn't make anesthesia, but right now, as it stands, her decision making in trying to subdue Gigantomachia with her classmates and the Pro Heroes, not looking so good. We then see Uraraka, and she's thinking about her friends and her classmates and how Shigaraki's always had run-ins with UA, and it's all been leading to this inevitable disaster. This situation with the villains and UA, it's never going to get better, and in this moment, I don't think she's too hopeful. And that's it. Our rest for this chapter is over. We snap back to the battle, and there's Shoto still holding Bakugo just beside himself, looking on in absolute horror, screaming, "Midoriya!" Shigaraki then reaches out, grabbing onto Deku's face, and exclaims, "Finally, I've got it." Shigaraki, for the first time ever, has a chance to take One for All from Deku. We then see Deku inside the One for All vestige world, and he probably thinks he's dead, but then he sees visions of Shigaraki and All for One behind him. Shigaraki tells All for One, "No, get out," and All for One tries to explain to him that you need to face this head on with your sensei, you need my help. And Shigaraki of course rebukes him and says, "No, shut up. This is my will, this is my dream." Is Shigaraki acting childish? Is he trying to use All for One and these powers by himself because he's confident and he knows he can do it and what he's gone through? Or is he trying to do all this despite All for One and sort of in spite of his teacher, and he's reverting to the Shigaraki we saw back at the USJ, who was just a pouty child and didn't understand why things didn't go his way? I do think Shigaraki is more mature. He's been through his own quirk awakening, as All for One mentioned, and he's clearly powerful. I do think Shigaraki's resolve is stronger than that pouty child at the USJ, but I wonder what else is going on here. I mean, why doesn't Shigaraki want All for One to handle things for him, if not just being stubborn? Is he worried about All for One taking his powers back, or suddenly claiming that Shigaraki's not a worthy successor and rejecting him? What's the downside to letting All for One help him out of this situation, which clearly is dire for Shigaraki? But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What's Shigaraki's maturity level right now, especially given all that's happened in this battle and his mental state? The last few panels of this chapter show Shigaraki sort of turning to a very startled Deku who realizes he can't move inside this One for All vestige world, and then Nana Shimura comes to Deku's side and says, "Hey, how about we do something about that?" Bro, Is Deku now going to have a long talk with Nana Shimura like we all want them to have, and she's going to tell him some more secrets about One for All and even how to use float better? Also, does Shigaraki now have a connection with Nana Shimura since he's now in this world and he now has All for One? We know All for One has a connection to Deku because Deku's connected to All for One's brother, who is the original user of One for All. So this opens up a lot of possibilities in this dream world. I mean, can Shigaraki confront Nana? Are they going to have a battle? Is Deku going to have to fight Shigaraki in this world? And I guess as an added bonus, All for One could also contact Nana Shimura in this world and be like, hey, how's it going? Remember that time I killed you? Now let's talk about Bakugo. I didn't do last week's chapter, so I really want to discuss Bakugou in some detail here. Obviously this goes without saying that he's a true MVP for saving Deku, but in taking those All for One tentacles or tendrils right in his stomach, this opens up a few possibilities on what Shigaraki could do to Bakugo. So let's discuss these. We don't know all of Shigaraki's quirks, especially because his body wasn't fully settled, but it's likely that he got everything from All for One, if not most of the powerful quirks. And with these tendrils, like we've seen All for One use, there is the ability to use forced Quirk Activation. What if Shigaraki, in stabbing Bakugo with these, could control him? There's so much focus on this battle between Deku and Shigaraki because he's the only one that can subdue Shigaraki with Black Whip and Float, but instead of thinking, ooh, this is finally what we wanted, Deku vs Shigaraki, now it's Deku vs Bakugo 2.0. Imagine Shigaraki, he's the most maniacal villain. If you want to be the worst villain, what do? You don't have to fight the hero. You have to make the hero fight his best friend, or his rival, or his classmate, or all three, or the other heroes. The silver lining to all of this, if that even exists, is that I know Bakugo's probably hurting right now with those tentacle wounds. That sounds weird. But we've seen this before. All for One thrashed All Might with those and threw him, hundreds of feet in the air. Also, Kurogiri sustained the same exact wounds that Bakugo did when All for One forcefully activated his Warp Quirk, allowing Shigaraki and his friends to escape. And we didn't hear much about Kurogiri recovering. Maybe just not because he was a villain and probably couldn't use a hospital. But it's likely that Bakugo, yes, he's out of commission for this fight, but he probably won't have a long road to recovery. He'll have to be in the hospital, but he'll make a full recovery. He'll be okay. If that's all Shigaraki does to him. I think that Shigaraki could really get inside Deku's head and manipulate Bakugo. And in that case, Bakugo is still conscious, but what would Bakugo say here? Would Bakugo tell Deku to, hey, don't worry about me, go all out and stop Shigaraki? That would be a huge climax for this arc. But what do you guys think? What's going to happen in the One for All vestige world between Nana, Deku, Shigaraki, and All for One? Will Bakugo be okay, or will he be controlled by Shigaraki? And of course, who's going to win this fight? Comment your theories down below. If you guys like My Hero Academia content and these chapter reviews, consider enrolling at UA today by subscribing. And until next time, hero or villain, plus ultra.